Hello viewers, I hope all of you are fine. Today I want to talk about the ultraviolet catastrophe and the role of Planck's in resolving the ultraviolet catastrophe issue. Today I want also to talk about the development of quantum theory of Planck's. So first of all, let's discuss the ultraviolet catastrophe. Basically in 1900, before Planck's, no one even could resolve the issue of explaining the spectrum of the black body completely, because when Rayleigh comes and he develops his formula on the basis of classical laws of physics, he gives us this relation, which basically intensity is equal to 2 pi c kt divided by lambda power 4. But this formula couldn't explain the whole spectrum of this black body, because this formula only explains the longer part of the electromagnetic spectrum. But when we put the values of shorter wavelength and want to resolve the issue of shorter part of the electromagnetic spectrum, then this formula couldn't give us any result, because you see here that if we put lambda equal to 0, then intensity approaches to infinity, which is impossible. It means that this formula cannot resolve or cannot explain the shorter part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which means that this formula needs some modification. Besides this, Weins also explained to study or to resolve the issue of the black body and explain the whole part of the electromagnetic spectrum, but Weins law also failed, because Weins law explained the shorter part of the electromagnetic spectrum and cannot explain the longer part of the electromagnetic spectrum, while the Rayleigh law explained longer part of the electromagnetic spectrum but couldn't explain the shorter part of the electromagnetic spectrum. That's why these two laws failed, because these two laws are based on the classical laws of physics. After this, a tremendous famous scientist Planck came and he modified the formula of Rayleigh and developed his own formula to explain this whole black body radiation spectrum. His formula is like this. You see here that intensity or radiant intensity is equal to 2 pi hc square divided by lambda power 5 1 over e power hc divided by lambda kt minus 1, where pi, this is pi, this is the speed of light, this is the Planck constant, this is the wavelength of the emitted radiations from a black body, and this is the Boltzmann constant, and this is the temperature, etc. Now when we put the values of different radiations, whether they are shorter or whether they are longer, all types of radiations gives us result here, and we get the intensity of all types of radiation on the basis of this formula. That's why this formula explains the longer part of the electromagnetic spectrum, as well as this formula explains the shorter part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Beside this, Rayleigh only explains the longer part of the electromagnetic spectrum, but when we go towards the shorter part of electromagnetic spectrum and we put values here, then the intensity becomes infinity. It means that Rayleigh cannot explain the shorter part of electromagnetic spectrum, which is basically here is the ultraviolet region. So that's why the ultraviolet catastrophe come, because the ultraviolet region cannot be explained on the basis of classical laws of physics, which is here in this case is basically the Rayleigh formula. So that's why ultraviolet catastrophe come, and that issue of ultraviolet catastrophe is resolved by the Planck, which is a famous scientist of 20th century beginning. So Planck resolved this issue and explained the whole part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now let's explain the Planck's quantum theory. According to Planck, a black body emit or absorb energy in quantized form, and the atoms of the black body is just like a tiny oscillators. When these oscillators vibrate, it emit energy or it absorb energy and discrete are in quantized form, and that discrete bundle or a packet of energy we call it photon, and the energy of these photon can be represented by this formula. E is equal to hf, or in generalized form En is equal to nhf, where n may be 1 2 3 4 5 6. The energy emission or absorption are only allowed in bundles or in packet form, and the energy of any particular body is basically, whether they are emitted that energy or whether they are absorbed, is basically the integral times of the smallest energy packet, which is basically the energy of a single photon. So that's why energy is quantized according to Planck's first assumption and according to Planck's first postulate. And the second part of the Planck's quantum theory is this, that the oscillator emits or absorbs energy in jumps. When a particular atom is in a particular state, then it cannot emit or absorb energy. But when that atom excited to a particular higher state from its ground state, then after the de-excitation, it emits energy when it jumps from the higher energy level to the lower energy level. That's why the energy difference of these two energy levels is equal to the energy of the emitted photon during that de-excitation. So these are the basic postulates of the Planck's quantum theory. This theory formed the basis for explaining blackbody radiations, the famous photoelectric effect, which is explained by Einstein on the basis of Planck's quantum theory and remove the classical drawbacks, and Compton effect, as well as some other effects explained on the basis of this Planck quantum theory. So basically Planck's provide a basic building block for the development of quantum mechanics and the quantum field theory and some other uh, interesting topics. So basically the birth of quantum theory is the Planck is basically the Planck's quantum theory. Thanks for your time. I hope you like this video. Thanks.